You know, when you talk about the Arizona Cardinals and you talk about this 2018 season, maybe it shouldn't have been a surprise that they ended up in the position that they did. Sure, there were other teams trying to go all nimbly-bimbly, trying to get themselves that number one overall pick. But nobody, and I mean nobody, lived up to the standard of the suck, quite like the Arizona Cardinals did. And maybe the offseason should have been an indication of the problems to come. When most of the rest of the league is focusing on offensive-minded head coaches, the Arizona Cardinals kind of go off the radar to bring in Steve Wilks from Carolina, where they had just made it to the wild card round and got beat by the Saints. They went with the defensive guy who didn't have a ton of head coaching buzz that I can really remember. So it was kind of a weird hire after Bruce Arians retired. And even then, you're thinking like Bruce Arians kind of kept them mediocre, which was probably much better than they really were. Then this team releases Honey Badger for reasons that are still unbeknownst to me. And when you say cap space, that's why they did it. That's dumb. Because they turned around and took some of that money they saved by not paying Honey Badger and dumped it into Sam fucking Bradford. Let me rewind that. Sam fucking Bradford. Like, there was still an NFL team stupid enough in 2018 with this guy with a totally bum knee, washed done, hadn't done shit in the NFL anyways, that said, I don't want to give him 15 million guaranteed reasons to play again in 2018. Like, that should have been your indication of just how much of a clown Steve Keim is. It should have been your indication of how much an idiot Michael Bidwell is. Should have been an indication that this season was going to go very quickly for the Arizona Cardinals, and it most certainly did. Look at them on defense even. Sure, they were fourth against the pass, but they were 32nd against the run. Steve Wilks, in all of his infinite brilliance, instead of trying to make his system work with the players and personnel that he had, where he has some personnel and some nice talent at all three levels of that defense, he said, nah, dog, we gonna run my system no matter what. And he fucked everything up. Butt naked last in the league in rushing yards allowed a game. Butt naked last. And you could even say the passing yard statistic is incredibly misleading because it is, because too many teams got monster leads on them and stopped throwing the ball in the second freaking half. And let's not even look at the offensive side of the ball. It was bad enough on defense. They gave up 40 points or more in 3 games. Look at the offensive side of the ball. 32nd in passing yards, 32nd in rushing yards, 32nd in total yards. In 16 games, their offense scored 20 or more points 4 times. At least you can say one thing for them. They were consistent. Their offense sucked consistently week in and week out. And just imagine the logic of spending the top 10 pick on Josh Rosen to be your heir apparent, your future at the position, and then saying to yourself, oh, we like Sam Bradford, we're going to give him 15 million reasons to play for us, and then you go out there and start him like he was going to be better than fucking Rosen. Like, how stupid was that? And to me, the exact moment that I knew Steve Wilks should have been fired was when Sam Bradford was absolutely sucking up the joint against the Bears in week 3 with about, 5 minutes left to go in the game. That's the time he decides he's going to put Josh Rosen in. Not at halftime, when it clearly was established after 2.5 games that Sam Bradford is done. He waits until late in the game to put the rookie in against a top-flight NFL defense. That should have told you right there that Steve Wilks was not long for a head coaching job with the Arizona Cardinals. It's hard to say there were even any highlights really for this season for the Cardinals, but there were a couple. They beat the 49ers twice, who also laid a fucking egg this year. They went into Lambeau and beat the Packers and got Mike McCarthy fired. Like, how embarrassing for the Packers. How embarrassing for Mike McCarthy. Whew. Good Lord. Chandler Jones had 13 sacks. That's another highlight. And that's about it. Larry Fitzgerald is wasting away the end of his career there. They couldn't figure out how to properly utilize David Johnson. Think about this. You got a future Hall of Famer in Larry Fitzgerald who can still do a little something. You got one of the best all-purpose running backs in the league in David Johnson. And this team finishes last in passing yards, last in rushing yards, last in total yards. Scores 20 or more points 4 times. Only a quarter of the games of the season. That goes beyond coaching, as bad as the coaching was. That goes to your front office. And speaking of the front office, when you look at their 2018 draft class, jury's obviously still going to be still out. Mason Cole started 16 games for him on the interior of that line. Chase Edmonds was kind of a nice, day 3 type of backup running back. He played all 16 games. Christian Kirk had some moments, 43 catches, 590 yards, 3 touchdowns. Not bad for a rookie second-round pick wide receiver. Some upside there. Josh Rosen stunk. 55% completion percentage, 2,200 passing yards, more INTs than touchdowns. Got sacked 45 times, and mind you, that's in 13 starts or whatever the hell it was. Rosen stunk. Flat out. And if I wanted to be narrow-minded enough to say, ha-ha, I told all of you that bum was a buster, I was right, I could do that. Except for the fact that doesn't tell the whole story about the inadequate and incompetent coaching he received throughout the course of the year, and the absolutely terrible play calling, and the atrocious protection of the offensive line. That's why it is very important to not ultimately pass judgment on these rookie quarterbacks after one season. If you're a Cardinals fan, you should be concerned and somewhat worried about Rosen because he stunk. He did. But one season does not a career make. It's just going to be important for them to do better and build better around Josh Rosen. The problem is, if you're a Cardinals fan, all 300 of you, you look at the clown running your clown show and Steve Keim, your general manager, and you have absolutely zero reason to have faith in this guy being able to get that done. As much as anything else, if Rosen ends up proving himself to be a bust and not living up to the hype and expectations, it's going to be because the organization around him failed him. And I'll use recent draft history as a perfect example of that. You go back to the 2012 draft. There are no players left on the roster from that draft. 2013, same thing. 2014, it's Dayon Buchanan. So those 3 drafts where you should have multiple players on the team, and even if you said you lost a guy to free agency here, you lost a guy to free agency there, you still have a couple of guys from those drafts that are in their mid to late 20s that are kind of the foundation of your team, and they have Dayon Buchanan. The 2015 draft, you got DJ Humphries, Marcus Golden, David Johnson, Rodney Gunter, J.J. Nelson. That is easily the best draft in recent history for Steve Keim. Easily. But DJ Humphries can't stay healthy. Golden's good. Johnson's a stud. But that's about it. 2016. What, Robert Kemdichi? Bitch, please. An overrated bust like the hell I thought he was going to be. And then 2017, Hassan Reddick, Budda Baker, Chad Williams. What the hell's Chad Williams doing? Hassan Reddick, Steve Wilkes fucked him up. Budda Baker is a very good player, yes. So there have been a couple of guys, but when you look at the general theme of things, 2012, who was their first-round pick that year? That was Michael Floyd. He drank himself out of the league for all intents and purposes. 2013, if I'm not mistaken, was Jonathan Cooper. Another massive miss. So they're missing on first-round guys. Like Dayon Buchanan's had a bit of a career, but DJ Humphries is inconsistent and struggles to stay healthy. Kemdichi's been a bust. Hassan Reddick is shaping up to be a bust because Steve Wilkes fucked him up this year. That's not good. And yet Steve Keim still has a job, and Steve Wilkes was fired, even though it was Steve Keim who hired Steve Wilkes. Excuse the fuck out of me. That makes absolutely no goddamn sense. Now, when you go into this offseason for the Cardinals, you could say you've got the number 1 overall pick in the draft, and you got $74 million in cap space. Okay. That doesn't mean this guy's going to have shit of an idea of what the hell to do with it. Especially when you look and you say, okay, you just got off of hiring somebody and ultimately firing somebody after 1 year that was clearly in over their head. So you go in an entirely different direction. You go for an offensive guy, but you go for a guy in Cliff Kingsbury who could have won in the Big 12. He got fired by Texas Tech. Let me repeat that. He didn't leave Texas Tech. He got fired. And there was so much buzz around him in the world of college football that a guy coming from a head coaching gig in a Power 5 conference, his next job was going to be offensive coordinator playing coffee running buddy to Clay Helton at fucking USC. But the Arizona Cardinals said, we want to break us off a piece of that. We want him to be our head fucking coach. Christ almighty. You might say, well, it's so crazy it just might work, and it could. Or it's so crazy it'll be one of these things that'll be the ultimate epitaph on Steve Keim's grave. Here lies the moron that hired Cliff Kingsbury to be his head coach. Holy shit. You really have any confidence in Steve Keim at all? Excuse me. Now, some of you might be saying, that's like a gallon jug of water. Why can't you just use the 16 or 20 ounce bottle, Schleggy? The 16 and 20 ounce bottles are for pussies. That's why. Real men drink their water out of a gallon. That's right. You don't like that? Fuck you. So you look at them free agent-wise and all that cap space. Larry Fitzgerald, is he going to be done? Is he going to come back? Upati, you would assume, is probably gone. Phil Dawson might bring back. Daniel Buchanan, will they bring him back? Will they not? Trey Boston. Marcus Golden, Rodney Gunter, J.J. Nelson, Ricky Seals-Jones, Joe Barksdale. So they've got some guys that they got to make some decisions on, and you would assume that some of those guys will be back in the fold, especially guys like Golden and maybe Buchanan, maybe not. Hopefully Fitzgerald, because, again, we only get to see him for a certain amount of time. I would like to see him play again and not go out the way that last season finished. When you look at this team, though, and what they really need to do in the offseason, between the free agent market and the draft, the number one priority, obviously, is you have to get better on the offensive side of the ball. Now, it doesn't mean that they still can't use some help on the defensive side of the ball. They're still searching, in my opinion, for a number 2 corner opposite Patrick Peterson. And eventually, if they trade Peterson, they're going to need a number 1 guy. And they could still use some help on that front line, particularly the interior of that line. But this draft has got to be about offense combined with free agency. Because if Josh Rosen fails, then you're even worse off for the next several years. It's one thing to have the number 1 overall pick and finish as the worst team in the league in 2018. You at least say, well, you've already got the quarterback. In theory, you don't have to go get him. You just work around him and build around him. And how does that come? That comes in the form of a left tackle, a right tackle, a wide receiver, a tight end, offensive guards, multiple offensive tackles, multiple guards. Fuck it. Multiple wide receivers. Hell, multiple tight ends. In some configuration, the vast majority of this draft should be on the offensive side of the ball, which, of course, creates a problem for the Arizona Cardinals because based off of their team needs, they picked the wrong fucking year to end up with the number 1 overall pick, when most of the top guys in this draft, in theory, are going to be on the defensive side of the ball. And sure, guys like Quinn Williams and Nick Bosa, maybe a Rashawn Gary, Josh Allen, any number of those guys could potentially come in and be big-time impact players on that defense, but that's not going to make Josh Rosen better. It's really not. Leave it to the Cardinals and leave it to Steve Keim and his incompetence to be shitty of shitty in a bad year of alignment in terms of their needs versus what's available based off of where they're drafting in the first round. So as we get to April, it would not surprise me to see the Cardinals, A, try to bail out of that number 1 overall pick, although I don't know that there's going to be a market for that, or B, potentially reaching a little bit for an offensive guy, passing on superior defensive players. And the simple truth of the matter is, if they get the right guy, it won't matter. And if they get the right guy offensively, it's the absolute right move, and they must do it. This 2019 season is critical because if Cliff Kingsbury fails, then he's got to be gone after a year, and now your general manager's got to be gone, and now you've got Michael Bidwell trying to rebuild things. Does that instill confidence in anybody? And if Cliff Kingsbury fails and Steve Keim fails, that ultimately means the 2019 draft was partially a failure, and ultimately, most importantly of all, Josh Rosen is probably a failure, and this organization's going to go back to being the irrelevant Cardinals they were for so many damn years. You have to build around Josh Rosen. Period. Exclamation mark. Point. Whatever the fuck. Period.